Hey, what's up? So it's not even Christmas anymore. I just decided to put this on over my hoodies because why not? But I was sitting there doing this little like workout thing with my barber, and I was like, you know what? There's this whole idea and this thing about being lonely versus being alone, and how they're not they sound the same. They probably are like synonyms, whatever that word is that makes two things alike, but they don't have to. They're not mutually whatever. Like they don't have to exist just because one does. And it's kind of something that you kind of just see over time is that okay, sure, there'll be times in your life where you're by yourself, but it doesn't you don't have to feel lonely during those times. And there's a value in those times. And when you just write it off as being lonely or it sucks or this and that, you can kind of lose sight of how important it is to be alone sometimes. And sometimes being alone is the most valuable thing for you in your life at that time. For me, last few years, I've been alone more than ever. And honestly, what's strange is I've noticed that I probably felt more lonely being around people than I have by myself, which may not seem like it makes sense, but it's one of those deals of okay, if you're around people to where you feel like they kind of get it. I don't know how else to explain it, but they get it. You don't feel alone. At least in my case, when I was around like my dad or certain people in my life, I felt to where it just one on one. It felt like I don't know. It felt the exact opposite of feeling lonely. Like it felt like I felt like there could have been a billion people in the room. It felt as full as I could be in that aspect. But then I've been around and been at parties or been at things to where there's a bunch of people and you feel completely lonely. You feel like there's no one there because of that understanding. There's this one quote I saw about being loved is being known. And it sounds really cheesy. It's a little really cliche, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, the times where I've been around the people that I feel like know or that I feel like reciprocate or whatever, there's something there in terms of understanding, the more love I felt or the more connection I felt, which makes sense. If you know someone, you have that connection point, it's easier to feel stuff or the biggest thing, care. It's hard for me to care about something if I don't feel like there's a thing there. Like if I'm doing something just cause or whatever, something like that, I can't really care about it no matter what it may seem from the outside looking in. And then it could be something as light as some little thing or whatever, but if I care about it, it could feel all much more than something that people would assume would be nothing compared to other stuff. But this thing is whatever. Like you make these little videos, this little thing I do for like however many minutes a week or whatever, just filming, just filming, like doing this little thing does more for me than a lot of other aspects of life that take more time or on the surface seem like they would be more fulfilling or more that I would care more about. But truth be told, it's like doing stuff like this or doing any little things I do, whatever, it kind of fills my cup in a way that the stuff that typically should fill my cup doesn't. Like there's a lot of things I've been trying to figure out and wrap my mind around in terms of life, and the biggest thing has been how do I feel like myself? How do I feel like human? Feel all these emotions, feel love, all this stuff again after losing the big connection point. And what I realized, the only time I've ever experienced that and gotten that back is when I had that love, that feel of like understanding, that like mutual whatever that I had back when a few years ago. And outside of that, there's been kind of glimpses of that, and there's been almost like I don't know how to describe it, but there's been like a seems like a foreshadowing, or there's been aspects of like or like glimpses of what could be very well be in the future and things that I could really enjoy doing, but things that I gotta work on in the meantime, or things that I gotta do, or things that I'm not necessarily ready for in a lot of ways. And over time, I just need to grow into and be ready for that in the future. And so all that stuff is great and dandy, but I'm talking about this whole alone versus lonely thing. And in the process of chasing those things, there's a lot of time where you're spent by yourself, a lot of time spent doing things you probably don't want to do. And it's really easy to feel lonely. So that's why it's important to have those times where you're doing stuff or whatever on your own accord or whatever, to where that gives you that feeling to where you're not always to where there's some fulfillment or some like there's some passion or some whatever within your life that you're doing. And what I realized is the more time I spend doing that stuff, the less lonely I feel, even if I'm by myself. Like I could sit here I do these other YouTube channels or whatever. I can sit there editing for hours and feel less lonely than I do spending 10 minutes with such and such, or doing this or doing that. And and what I realize is it's a lot easier when you to do something, even if it takes more effort and it takes more time, or whatever, if you passionate or care about something versus something you don't. It's the same idea about loneliness. when you're alone and you can be fine with that and you're okay with that, you can take that a lot easier than when you're scared of being lonely and every time you're by yourself, you always need to do messaging people who are doing this and that and you can't really handle it. It's about understanding that there's a time and place for that thing and balancing that out with what you have time spent with other people and stuff like that. And I know all this is very easy for me to say. I was one of those little shy kids that just kind of did my own thing. So I understand that. But even as I've done more talking or been around more people and stuff like that, the same sentiment has remained that you need to be like I need to have time by myself. And I have a low social battery anyways in some aspects, in some aspects I don't. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure about that. But I still think it's super important for even like the most extroverted people and the most whatever people to have the time where they're sitting there by yourself and really just thinking and processing and going through and not rushing past what's going on and allow yourself to feel, go through. I mean, if you're going through tough times to grieve or going through happy times to enjoy it or value the people around you or like have those times because you almost need that time to recharge and to like reevaluate and to it helps you be present also like because if you're just constantly doing stuff how are you able to stay present and really like treasure whatever what you're going through if you're always on to the next thing if you're never able to slow down and not necessarily like be unproductive and be a slouch and just scroll on TikTok or whatever all day, but like have a time to where you're just sitting there doing nothing or sitting there and being alone. Maybe listening to music, doing like workout, writing, going on a run, taking out pet dogs or whatever. It could literally be like, I mean, playing a sport, playing a game, going, drawing, or I don't know. It could be literally anything, but having those times, I feel like it's that reset that your body needs. So when you're scared of it, when you're like, oh, I don't want to be lonely, all this stuff, then it's really tough to have those moments versus when you actually put the emphasis on like, hey, you know what? I need this time just to be myself. And you know what? I'm by myself, but I'm not lonely. This is one of those things I need to do. And eventually for me, I've grown to love it more and more. Like obviously like being around people, but I also like have my own time. So it's important to have that duality in life, no matter who you are. So don't be whatever about being lonely and all stuff. Like treasure the times and value those times because I know eventually sometime in life, if you get married, have kids, all that stuff, it's a lot more few and far between. So you're gonna miss it eventually. So the better you are at getting good with yourself, the better you are at being good for other people and especially like relationships, kids, all that stuff. Because if you don't have a good foundation of being good with yourself before you get into all that stuff and you lose that, then you're kind of screwed versus having that and establishing to where you kind of know what to do and know the best practices and all that kind of stuff going forward. And all it really takes is just being patient and allowing life to happen instead of just trying to do stuff like, oh, I have to be doing something. Just do your thing, chill, and just kind of take it in because we only got one of these things, so you might as well live it till we all die one day. But love you guys. Have a nice day. Subscribe, like, and peace.